Imagine it's the early 1900s and you are running a struggling tobacco company when your four children come to you and say, "Dad, I think we should pivot our entire business and start selling this new thing called bubblegum." And then to help improve your sales of bubblegum, you start including baseball cards with the gum, to the point where this blows up into $1 billion business and you no longer put bubblegum in the packs of cards. This is the wild and crazy story of the Topps Company. In 1890, members of the Solomon family founded the American Leaf Tobacco Company, which imported tobacco into the United States primarily from Turkey and sold it to other tobacco companies, sort of as a middleman. What this means is that Topps missed out on all of the pre-war era baseball cards. So when you think about some of the older 1890s Peck and Snyder baseball cards, or some of the famous tobacco cards like the 1886 Old Judge cards, or the 1909 T206 tobacco cards, Topps is not making baseball cards at this point. They missed out on this entire era. And it's not until 1908 when Morris Shorin came in control of the company. And this will be important primarily for his four children, as I mentioned. By the 1930s, the American Leaf Tobacco Company started having a lot of difficulties. Through World War I, it began to be cut off from its Turkish supplies of tobacco, and then later, the Great Depression, which hurt a number of American businesses. Shorin's four sons, Abram, Ira, Philip, and Joseph, decided that they wanted to focus the company on a new product, but to take advantage of all the business relationships they've made for distribution. To do this, they actually relaunched the company as Topps, which was a name that they thought would indicate that they would be tops in their field, and the new field they chose was to make bubblegum. So in 1938, the business is founded, and actually this is a picture which includes three of the four sons. In 1947, Fleer is leading the bubblegum market with its own double bubble brand. And Topps decides to go right after them with their own brand of bubblegum called Bazooka, which included a wrapper with a comic strip on it. In the very beginning, the comic strip was the Atom Bubble Gum. So there was an Atom Bubble character, and then eventually turned into the famous Bazooka Joe comics that we know and love today. And back at this time, bubblegum was still a relative new product, sold in individual pieces, as you can see here, for a penny. And Topps' Bazooka gum is actually still sold today. But it doesn't mean that Topps didn't have baseball cards before the 1950s. In 1949, Topps created a set of 252 magic photo cards, which actually sound pretty awesome. I hadn't heard of these till I did the research. They were blank white cards until you moistened them with water and then exposed them to light and an image would appear. And these were free inserts into bubblegum packs. It featured a lot of fancy imagery of the Eiffel Tower, the Empire State Building, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, as well as stars and celebrities in pop culture, but also include 19 baseball cards, including Babe Ruth, Roger Horsby, and Cy Young. In 1950, Topps tried their hand again to increase bubblegum sales by packaging them with trading cards of popular TV characters. This one was Hopalong Cassidy, and a shout out to my mom, who I know watched Hopalong Cassidy when she was growing up, and mentioned this to me when I was a little boy. So you can see there were black and white photo cards that were included with their bubblegum. And in 1951, Topps tried again to get a little more sales, but using baseball cards. They produced these redbacks and bluebacks because they were actually baseball cards that were used to make a baseball game. So each one would have the result of an at-bat, like a foul ball, a hit, a double, a single, a home run, and so forth. And the backs of them were completely opaque with a red design or blue design, just like a deck of cards. But they never really caught on until we start the vintage era of baseball cards. 1952, Topps changed their approach. They went away from baseball cards as a game and made a complete set of 407 baseball cards. They also decided that the original cards were too small, so these were 2 inches by 2 5/8 inches, and went to square corners instead of rounded corners. The cards now had a color portrait of the player, and on the back they had all their stats. I also want to add that the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle rookie card is the most valuable baseball card of all time, and recently sold for $12.6 million, which is unbelievable. Cy Berger is often called the father of modern baseball card. He was a 28-year-old veteran of World War I who designed the 1952 Topps baseball card set on his kitchen table in his apartment in Brooklyn, along with Woody Gelman. Each card had the player's name, a photo, and a facsimile of their autograph, as well as some stats on the back. Cy Berger would go on to work for Topps for another 50 years, and then serve as a consultant for more than 5 years after that. I also read that he was really given free rein by Topps to figure out how to do the whole baseball card business. So you can see this picture on the left. He went to the players themselves and tried to sign them to exclusive contracts to be the only company that would sell their baseball cards with gum. And eventually he built up relationships with most of the players in the league and became kind of famous in that world for paying players for their rights to their baseball cards. It was also really interesting that Topps started including baseball card stats on their cards, because at the time, reliable and complete baseball card stats for all players was actually not widely available. So Topps as a company compiled the stats themselves from published box scores. So even though there had been baseball cards around for a while, it was really a novelty that Topps had included such detailed statistics on their cards, and people who bought baseball cards often studied the numbers. It was the first time they could really compare players side by side, and they used that information obviously for trading cards with their friends. You'll also notice that the first stat line here is for the past year and then for the player's lifetime. But what's interesting is Topps wasn't sure how long it would take for them to sell the 1952 cards. And so they actually prepared themselves that it might take more than a year to sell the cards. And so instead of writing 1951 as the past year stats, they actually said past year and thought that that might allow them more time to sell the cards. Now, Cy Berger's work paid off. The 1952 Topps cards were selling like gold. And then he went to the head Shorin of the company and said, we should do a second series, and quickly asked if they could get it out. They did get it out. The much smaller series came out, but it included the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card. The only problem was when they shipped the cards all over the country, it was getting towards the end of the season, baseball cards weren't selling as fast, and at the end of the year, they had a ton and ton of inventory as they tried to make room for the 1953 cards. So Topps stored the 1952 cases that went unsold for, I think, 6 years. And eventually Cy Berger hired a garbage boat to take the remaining boxes out of storage and dump them into the ocean. This is a true story. If you can imagine, some of the $12 million Mickey Mantle baseball cards being dumped into the ocean, sadly, that is what took place, because back then there wasn't a lot of value to baseball cards, and it was just taking up storage room as they were preparing for additional years. Really a tragic story. 1953 gets to the second set, full complete set of Topps baseball cards, but honestly, I just want to take a second to say, between the two cards, I actually kind of like the look of the 1953 Mickey Mantle card, and in terms of Holy Grail cards, I think this is one of my favorite cards of all time, and in a low condition grading, you can get this card for maybe $2,000 to $4,000, whereas you can't get into a Mickey Mantle 1952 card for under like $20,000 to $40,000. So it's a great value, and I actually think it's a better looking card overall. That's just my opinion. Also, did you know that the player autographs you see on Topps designs are facsimiles of their signatures from their Topps contracts? So that's why they're on the cards everywhere. They're not, signed on the card and so forth. They're actually printed out in the design, but they scan the autographs from their contracts and include them in the design of baseball cards, which I thought was really fascinating. In 1954, the new trend for Topps was to actually include 2 pictures on the front of the cards. So up to this point, there's always been a simple portrait on the front of the card, and now they actually have 2 pictures. You have the portrait of the player, which, again, these are photos that are generally black and white, and then they're hand-tinted by an artist or hand-colored to look more like the player. And then they've included these black and white full-length photos and poses from the game. So this is a really cool design and some of the new innovations and novelty that Topps brought to baseball cards. Then in 1955, they used the same basic format, landscape, full-length photo that actually was tinted, and then their portrait as well. And fun fact, some of the portraits for the players were recycled year by year, so the artist didn't have to do more work, and then they would mix in a new full-length photo of action. In 1956, the close-up tinted photo was placed against a full tinted background of a game action photo from the player. So these close-up headshots for some of the players, as we mentioned, were used year to year, and then they had a great in-action photo as sort of the background to this whole picture. This is a beautiful, beautiful looking card set. Again, in my collection, I don't know if I would be in love with cards that are sideways instead of up and down, but in terms of the history of baseball cards, these are amazing. In 1956, Topps was competing with other companies, including Bowman, to get the attention and to sign exclusive contracts with the players. So this competition went back and forth. In fact, between these years, there are some players that you would only see in Bowman and some players you'd only see in Topps. And Topps was clearly leading the race, but again, it was kind of annoying to fight this battle back and forth with Bowman. So in 1956, Topps bought out Bowman. Interestingly enough, they actually closed down the brand and didn't produce the cards anymore. And it left Topps as the predominant producer of baseball cards for the next quarter century. From 1957 on, almost all cards are now actual posed photographs. Either a headshot or with a piece of equipment, like here holding their baseball bat. So now instead of hand coloring black and white photos, we're now looking at actual color photographs that are on the cards, and these are stunning. I also love how to highlight this. It's basically the picture is the design, and there's very little artwork or text on these cards to really highlight kind of the innovation that they brought. The next thing Topps brought in 1957 was career statistics on the back. So as we mentioned, up to this point, cards originally had one line for statistics from the most recent year, and then another line that might include their lifetime totals. But what Topps had decided to do for the first time in 1957 was to include a year-by-year statistic for the player's entire professional career on the back of the card. This was quite an innovation. It also included more stats like doubles, triples, home runs, RBIs, and so forth than previous years. And Topps will alternate including full career statistics with just the most recent year back and forth for the next few years until we talk about this in a little bit. The other big change in 1957 was Topps shrank the size of the cards to 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches, which is the new standard that remains in place today. So on the right-hand side, you can see a 2020 Yordan Alvarez rookie card that I've included here for comparison, and it's just to show how from 1952 to even 1956, the Topps cards were a lot bigger than the current cards today, and obviously giant in comparison to the tobacco era cards. 1962, photographs were not in sharp focus or true exceptional natural color until 1962. So again, we have photos on the front, but these are dramatically improved quality of the photos. And then in 1963, Topps made the career stats permanent. And so instead of alternating between 1 year, like on the left, and then their lifetime, versus on the right-hand side, the player's career statistics, this practice of career statistics became permanent, except for 1 year that we'll talk about in a little bit. And in 1965 to 1966, other companies like Fleer, who were trying to sell baseball cards, filed a complaint alleging Topps was engaging in unfair competition since it had accumulated the vast majority of exclusive contracts with players. Ultimately, the commission concluded that because the contracts only covered the sales of baseball cards with gum, that competition was still possible for Fleer and these other companies to sell their cards with other low-cost products. However, Fleer at this time chose not to pursue selling cards and ended up selling the remaining exclusive contracts it had to Topps for $395,000, which is a big sum of money in this time. This basically gave Topps an effective monopoly over the baseball card market. And then around the same time, Topps was faced with another challenge as the Major League Baseball Players Association figured out that instead of Topps going one-to-one and signing contracts with players, they could group together as a Major League Baseball Players Association and sell the rights to use any of the players' lump sum, as it did in this case with Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola bottle caps had baseball players on the bottom of them, and the union was able to sell that exclusive bottling license for $120,000. And so they really put pressure on Topps. Shorin, who was leading the company at the time, declined, and there was debate back and forth. And the Major League Baseball Players Association actually went to Fleer and offered them exclusive rights to make baseball cards for all the players with gum starting in 1973 because they needed time for all of the existing Topps exclusive contracts, which often were signed for up to 5 years, to expire. Amazingly enough, Fleer declined the proposal, likely due to cost, and by the end of that year, Topps had agreed to double the payments to each player from $125 to $250, and also began paying the Major League Baseball Players Union a percentage of their overall sales. Around the same time, in 1965, Topps licensed production to Canadian candy maker O-Pee-Chee to make identical baseball cards to the top sets. And this was true until 1969, when the backs of the O-Pee-Chee cards were now branded O-Pee-Chee and required to include French language text on the back of its cards in addition to English. In 1971, Topps made an exception to their practice of showing complete career statistics on the back when they chose to start including a second photo on the back of the card as well. So you'll see this awesome Nolan Ryan card, and on the back they've got a giant picture of Nolan Ryan, and so his stats were shortened to the most recent year in lifetime is one line, and this is the only exception to that practice, which makes the 1971 set a little bit more unique and rare. The other thing that's wild about this design is that in 1971, Topps made their cards with all black borders. So these were known to chip very easily. They got frayed. They don't look good. I picked out 2 examples here where you can see some wear and tear on the cards. And in general, it is very, very hard to get a high-graded card from 1971 because of this design. The black borders wouldn't return to Topps until 1986, and it's just the top part of the card. And then they did it in football in 1985, and then the 2007 baseball card set. The 1971 Topps set also, for the first time, included cards showing color photographs from actual games on the front. The cards themselves obviously have been in color for a while, including the artist drawings, but now you can actually get game action photographs on the front of cards. And this is some examples here: the Thurman Munson card, Bob Oliver, even Ken Boswell, of real in-game action photos. It's just an amazing set. In fact, in 1972, because of this, Topps included a special subset called In-Action Cards, which took this in-game photos to the next level as a subset for certain players. Also in 1972, Topps went public and offered stock to the public for the first time. And the coolest part about this is that from 1972 on, we actually able to get public information on the sales, the annual sales of Topps per year. So you can see 1972 somewhere in the $60 million per year range. Then we've got the huge junk wax era following up until the recent pandemic where the baseball card market has really exploded. More on that later. In 1974, baseball was in the middle of going through a lot of changes. The previous year, the American League included a designated hitter rule, and shortly thereafter, they also created free agency. As well as baseball cards have become more and more popular, and the collectors are becoming smarter and looking for more valuable rookie cards than ever. So to build into that trend, Topps released its first traded set late in 1974, stacking it with some new rookies who were called up from the minors, as well as covering all the players who changed teams during the season. What I really like about this design on the back is that they have a little, pretend article here of the details of the trade, as if it was a current modern day newspaper. 1981 is when we saw the end of the Topps monopoly because there was a lawsuit again. A judge ruled that Topps' exclusive right to sell baseball cards was only specific to gum, and they allowed Fleer and at this time Donruss to enter the market. So Fleer would use tiny stickers, and Donruss included these puzzle pieces that you could assemble a bigger picture. In this case, in 1991, it was kind of a cool picture of Babe Ruth, but over time it was Warren Spahn and so forth. And so Topps is still the leader in baseball cards at this time, but now there's new manufacturers making inroads, and this is really the era of my collecting, which we'll talk about. The other thing that's fascinating is in 1981, Topps really took the Topps traded sets to a whole new focus of rookies. So in this case, when you look at, we'll say the 82 set, where Cal Ripken had his own rookie card in the base set because he had played so well, the Topps traded version had a rookie card dedicated just to Cal Ripken. And so it actually came out later than this multiplayer rookie card, but this 1992 Topps traded Cal Ripken Jr. card is the most valuable and most collected version of Cal Ripken's rookie card, in part because it's now dedicated to him. 1984, all the way through 1991, Topps created a special collector's edition complete set, which was made on very premium white stock called Tiffany. These were identical to the base issue cards in design, statistics, and everything. But you can see when you look at the back of the cards, the higher quality white cardboard stock with the glossy finish on the front really popped and set Tiffany cards apart. Also in 1984, Topps was purchased again, returned private, but then the new ownership again took it and made it publicly available as a stock in 1987. The company was now renamed to the Topps Company. And the management is still in the hands of the Shorin family at this point, even through all these purchases and acquisitions. And with this fever, I feel like we're really building up to the junk wax era and all the new competition. The rush to get rookie cards led Topps to begin to sign rights to produce baseball cards of minor leaguers. And in 1985, Topps had signed the rights to the 1984 USA Olympic team so that they could include their cards in the most recent set. And I would say this was actually a wild success primarily because of the Mark McGwire card. I happen to know that the 1985 Topps Mark McGwire card is one of the most sought after and then most graded cards of all time. And really, this has been fueled by who can get to the rookie cards first. Which leads us to the junk wax era, which is primarily where my childhood was. Now, the first thing I think about this era is 1986, and we're going to get to the crazy designs. So here are all the Topps designs from the 1970s, and you can kind of get a sense they have the same feel of what Topps baseball cards looks like. And then we'll do the same thing with the 1980s. So here's Rickey Henderson's cards from 1980 through 1985, and there's a certain feel about the cards. And then I don't know what happened. I should probably do a little more digging into who the designer was. But 1986, the card design is just dramatically different from what we've seen from Topps before. This was also the first year that I was buying wax packs as a kid. I have tons and tons of these cards. The black border at the top makes them very hard to be in good condition, but I actually have a soft place in my heart for this design, but it really, really doesn't fit the overall look of Topps. And then what's interesting is if you go to the next year, 1987, Topps brought this like wood grain into their designs, and it also makes no sense. These 2 years just really stick out, kind of like a sore thumb, especially when you look at what Topps did for the rest of the 90s. Sorry, the rest of the 80s. It looks like it goes back to normal. So these are 2 really interesting years. They're the first 2 years I collected heavily in the sport, and they're just really vast departures in designs from what Topps was doing before. In 1989, Bowman returned. So Topps, with this race and competition of new companies, brought its former competitor and sub-brand that it owned, Bowman, back to baseball cards. And then with this set, they chose to focus on a lot of young players and bright prospects, which really paid off with the 1989 Bowman Ken Griffey Jr. What a year to bring this set back. This is also one of the most sought-after cards of Ken Griffey Jr. But at this time, Topps is facing dramatic competition. And really the launch of the 1989 Upper Deck is really what changed baseball cards, I think, in a dramatic way. The 1989 Upper Deck cards had the feel and quality of the white cardstock with the glossy finish of what Topps was doing with Tiffany, but in their base set. And on the back of the cards was a little diamond hologram, so you could see kind of the sort of proof that it was a authentic quality Upper Deck card. And at the time, I remember buying wax packs from Topps for about 35 to 50 cents per pack. The Upper Deck cards launched at $1, and many stores were selling them for $1.25 because they couldn't keep inventory in. And so we really are creating in 1989 a premium marketplace for baseball cards that we hadn't seen before, and higher quality cards that's really driving competition in the industry. And specifically, the 1989 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card is the most graded card of all time. So when you think about collectors paying to have their cards graded, Ken Griffey Jr.'s Upper Deck card is number 1 by far and away. His 89 Topps card is number 2. His 89 Fleer is number 3. And his 89 Donruss is number 7 on the list. So Upper Deck made a big splash with their launch. I remember how much of a big deal this was. I should probably dedicate an entire video to the history of Upper Deck and how they really just innovated and transformed the baseball card business at the time. Additionally, in 1990, there's even more competition. When you look at what Score was doing with Bo Jackson, the 1990 Leaf set was very premium looking and had the card everybody was chasing, the Frank Thomas rookie at the time. And obviously the Ken Griffey Jr. second year card. And so all of these really premium designs and high quality cards put a lot of pressure on Topps, and obviously Topps is going to respond here. So in 1991, Topps changed pretty dramatically, and they removed bubblegum from the cards. So as you can see on the left-hand side here, the 1990 cases said bubblegum cards, and in 1991 it just says picture cards. In part, this is because the baseball cards were the main focus of buying packs of cards. It was no longer about selling bubblegum and then increasing sales of bubblegum with cool baseball cards. Baseball cards were the main reason to buy the packs at that point. And the complaints that many collectors were giving is that the bubblegum was staining the cards and reducing the quality of the cards in the pack. So Topps has removed it in line with what competitors were doing at the time. Also that year, Topps had his 40th anniversary sweepstakes, and this is getting to the end of my childhood collecting era, but I remember distinctly that my brother and I saved up a lot of our allowance, and we purchased a lot of self-addressed stamped envelopes to enter this competition. So the sweepstakes was that Topps was giving away one complete set from every year of baseball cards from 1952 to 1991, as well as one grand prize winner would win all 40 sets. And so this was just an amazing opportunity. At the time, I knew how valuable baseball cards were, and so my brother and I, we got one of these sweepstakes entry forms, printed out our names on them. You had to put them in an envelope and mail them in. I spent way too much of my allowance on that, and unfortunately, we didn't win anything. I really did expect to win something since we sent in, over 100 of these. But obviously, in a large sweepstakes, the chances of winning were very slim. But by 1991, the pressure from the market had increased, and Topps decided to produce its own premium line of cards, which they called Topps Stadium Club. What you'll notice is that it now has the premium cardstock, the Kodak branded high-quality images, and then what Topps says is artistic photos. Their artistic photos are not my taste. I don't need to see Nolan Ryan in a tuxedo pretending to throw a baseball, and I don't need to see Jeff Bagwell hanging out on the side of the bleachers. But if you look at these cards, the pictures are distinctly different in feel. The quality of the cards and the photos is very high, and then you actually will see in the Stadium Club branding on the bottom is a gold foil printing. And in 1991, Topps brought this gold foil printing to its Desert Shield cards. So this is identical to their base set of cards, but what Topps did is they selected a certain subset, so they made 7,000 of each card with a gold stamp, and these were supposed to be sent off to the troops who were fighting in the Middle East. That's why it has a Desert Shield logo. It is thought that many of the cards were either brought back from the Middle East by soldiers, or some were intercepted and not shipped over there at all. But because there's so few of these Desert Shield cards, they become kind of collector's items, high-value cards. And before the era of even serial numbered cards, this is sort of the first look at some of the exclusivity of baseball cards. In 1992, Topps moved to the premium white cardstock that we saw from Upper Deck and other competitors. So on the left-hand side here, you can see the 1991. Now the front is very nice and premium. So Topps did a good job of flooding it with white and making it look very premium. But when you look on the back, you can still see it's the gray cardstock that you see that's common among baseball cards at that time. But when you compare on the right side, the 1992 Bo Jackson, when you flip over to the back, you can just see how the whole cardstock is premium white. It pops much more in all the text and everything on the back, and then it has that glossy photo finish. Also in 1992, Topps brought their gold editions. These are identical cards to their base ones, but you can see that the name of the player and their team name is printed in that gold foil that we saw from Stadium Club, as well as on the Desert Shield. But now they've created this as a subline for certain players within each set, and something that collectors looked for and obviously have a higher value than the base cards. Also in 1992, Topps inserted some of their 1993 designs as pre-production samples, which is pretty awesome. So 9 players from the 1993 set were included as pre-production cards, and you can see if you received one of these cards on the back, it would have a little design here that says this is the 1993 pre-production sample. What was really cool about this 1993 set is that, again, Topps brought back photos of the player on the back, so you can see how they did a great job. They still have the career statistics, but now have a player on the back. The 1993 Topps set was also an 825 card set, and this is the first time in over 20 years that they actually split that into 2 series because they had so many cards. Topps gold cards for this set were also included in every 15, randomly inserted into every 15 card pack. In 1993, Topps created the first refractor cards and brought them on their brand Topps Finest. So the technology utilizes this reflective foil that gives the cards a shiny rainbow appearance. You'd almost have to slightly move the card back and forth to see the effect better than these still images. But the refractors have become very, very popular over time. It's also a way to make the cards look more premium, and other brands followed suit as well. Modern era of baseball cards. In 1996, Topps brought the chrome technology to Bowman. So when you think about Bowman base and then Bowman chrome, the chromium paper has a shiny metallic look to it. They're also a little bit more firm and durable than the paper cards, and they were first brought in 1996, and they were identical to the base cards, but in the chrome paper. In 2000, Topps brought the Topps Chrome, and you can see the Bowman Chrome again, but to the original Topps line. Now, by this point, you can see there's a lot of variety in baseball cards, and in fact, when I was a little boy, Wade Boggs was my favorite baseball player, and I was a little bit put off by having to collect all three of his rookie cards from Topps, Donruss, and Fleer. Gone were the days where when you bought the Nolan Ryan rookie card from Topps, you knew that was his true rookie card and there were no others. But you can see with all the varieties we've just talked about Topps Gold, Chrome, and so forth, and then refractors, that there's just so many cards. And here's an example. So how many rookie cards in 2003 do you think LeBron James has that PSA recognizes as different versions or varieties of his rookie card? I have a picture here of some of them just so you can see, but go ahead and take a guess. And I'm going to guess you're too low because the answer is 479. So no longer do you have to collect 3 rookie cards of Wade Boggs. You would have to go out and track down 479 rookie cards of LeBron James. And this is obviously a basketball example, but it was true for all the different varieties that were coming to baseball. If you're thinking that number sounds way too high and is impossible, I actually counted them. If you go to psacard.com and type in 2003 LeBron James, you can see all the different designs and varieties and refractors and chrome cards you'd have to buy to get all the rookie cards of LeBron James. Which is not surprising that in 2006, the resulting explosion of varieties of baseball cards caused the Major League Baseball Players Association to take dramatic measures, as all of these cards actually were hurting interest, and consumers didn't know which ones they should be buying. It was hard to know which were the cards to get. And so the Major League Baseball Players Union announced that only Topps and Upper Deck would be given licenses to produce baseball cards, and that they would limit the number of cards and offerings that these companies would create. They also required that players would not appear on cards until they actually reached the major leagues. In 2007, Topps was acquired by Michael Eisner, who was the Disney CEO, his own private company, and they were looking at expanding into entertainment and media, and there was even talk about making a Bazooka Joe movie. But the Topps purchase was a genius purchase at the time, and I'll show you why, because Topps is public. So you can see in 2007, Topps sales were close to $200 million per year. And then by the time that Michael Eisner and his company would go to look to sell it, you can see that they would triple the revenue of the Topps company beforehand. So it was a great purchase and a great plan for the new owners of Topps. And this is where the Topps monopoly returns. In 2009, Topps became the first official baseball card of the Major League Baseball, creating a monopoly. They boxed out Upper Deck to be an approved card, and Topps had exclusivity for the use of Major League Baseball and the team trademarks and logos on cards, stickers, and other products, including Major League players. The exclusive deal was extended in 2013, extended in 2018 again, and it was currently scheduled to be exclusive with Topps through at least 2025. More on that in a moment. And this really brings us to the ultra-modern era of baseball cards, in my opinion. And what I think this is really represented is by parallel series, increased varieties. You can even see serial numbered cards being popular, and then on-card autographs, and on the right-hand side, the rookie patch autos, actually including game-used memorabilia and jersey patches in baseball cards. I love it. This is a great part of the hobby, and it's a fun thing to chase, but it's also been a huge explosion in the varieties of cards to collect. The other part about the modern baseball card era here is NFTs. So in 2020, Topps announced a collaboration with Wax.io to make their cards tradable on the blockchain and created NFT baseball cards. And if you're familiar with this, these are not real baseball cards. These are cards you cannot hold in your hand. They only exist as digital images online. I personally am not interested in NFTs at all. I kind of said this will be a fad and go away. I'm not sure if the jury's out on that, but I have no interest in fake cards. I love to hold a card in my hand and look through my collection. So at this point, it's 2021, and Topps is planning to go public again. Michael Eisner's company has made a lot of money on the purchase of his investment, and it's April, and they're going to go public, and they're valued around $1.3 billion. However, right before the deal to take this new company public, the capital management company backed out of the deal, in part because of a surprise monopoly by Fanatics. So in August of 2021, Fanatics acquired the future exclusive licenses with Major League Baseball players and the Major League Baseball Players Association to produce baseball cards. This was a shock to the industry, and now Topps can't make baseball cards, and it's kind of shut out of the business. This turned the whole world upside down of baseball cards. And I did a little digging into how this came about. So Michael Rubin was the CEO of Fanatics, and he went to the Major League Baseball Card Association and Major League Baseball Players Association and said on baseball cards, currently the industry like Topps is selling them to resellers or middlemen, and then they're marking up the cards and selling them to hobby shops. And so the new pitch that he made to them is that they would sell direct to the hobby shops so that the league would make more money and players would make more money, but the shops would pay a lower price than all these markups that a middleman had. So by cutting out the middlemen, both sides could get a better deal. And this is the model that he proposed. And then he also offered Major League Baseball Players Association the chance to make money off of resold cards through their own live stream sales in an auction marketplace. And so basically the day before Topps was going to get approval to go public and sell, the Major League Baseball Players Union announced that Fanatics was going to be the exclusive licensee for baseball cards starting in 2025. And this turned the whole market upside down, and this is basically a coup. So now in January of 2022, Topps is basically forced to sell to Fanatics for $500 million, pennies on the dollar compared to what the company was worth. But without the Major League Baseball Players Association licenses, Topps itself was probably not worth very much money. So now we've entered what I call the Fanatics era. And so Fanatics is now sort of the true monopoly, and the only question is, what will be the future of baseball cards going on from here? I personally am not too worried about it. I think in general, monopoly is bad. Monopolies are bad for business. It doesn't drive competition to make the products better or prices better. But I do think with all the money Fanatics has paid to make this happen, that they will invest in advertising and product innovation to grow the hobby of baseball cards. But I also say 80% or more of my interest in the hobby is existing vintage cards and pre-junk wax era cards, which is where I get the most fun out of buying and selling and collecting, and that will not change because they're not making any more older cards. So if you have a chance, the Weekly Slab has an episode on what they think is the future of cards, and we will all find out together. So this has been a production of Sports Cards Edge. Our goal is to help give you an edge in making money with sports cards, and make sure you like and subscribe. And again, thank you to all the sources for the information I pulled from this, including the Topps archives, Baseball Cardpedia, Topps itself, PSA, Wikipedia articles, and ChatGPT.